My family walked away with millions at Grandpa's funeral. For me, a single plane ticket to Monaco, and a meeting that would change everything they thought they owned, and everything I was about to take. You are welcome. If you are just joining us, then do well to subscribe so you'll be updated on all our mind-blowing family revenge stories, and also like and comment where you are watching from. My name is Susan, and this is my story. The day of my grandfather's funeral was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in feeling. Everyone hugged, whispered condolences, and pretended to mourn. But I knew the truth. They were already calculating what belonged to them. The lawyer called my name. I walked forward, expecting a folder of papers, maybe some token of inheritance. Instead, he handed me a small envelope, no more than the size of a hand. I opened it. Inside, a plane ticket to Monaco. I blinked. My mother's voice rang in my ears, light and cruel. Guess Grandpa didn't love you that much. Her laugh echoed around me as the rest of my family's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Luxury cars. A penthouse. A yacht. Shares in the company. Mhilo. All theirs. And me? A flight across Europe with nothing else. I could have cried. I could have shouted. I could have stormed out. But something inside me sparked, a mixture of hurt, defiance, and curiosity. I folded the ticket, tucked it in my coat, and left the room before anyone could see the fire rising in my eyes. The airport was busy. The city was oblivious to the storm brewing in my heart. I boarded the plane and stared out the window, watching the clouds swallow the world below, imagining every luxurious thing my family had claimed, every smile they had worn as if the world belonged to them. By the time I landed in Monaco, the sun had dipped low, painting the Mediterranean in gold and orange. My luggage was the only one that felt like mine. The rest of my family had their yachts, their mansions, their champagne. A driver waited outside, holding a simple sign with my name on it. My heart skipped. My curiosity piqued. I approached, and he smiled faintly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice polished, almost formal. "The prince wants to see you." My mind froze. The prince? My grandfather had never mentioned royalty. My family's faces flashed before me, smug, confident, thinking they had won. I took a deep breath. This was no longer about what they had taken. This was about what I was about to claim. Somewhere deep inside I knew. The real inheritance wasn't money. It was power, opportunity, and the chance to make them realize they had underestimated me. And that was when I smiled. Not out of joy. Not yet. But because I had just stepped into the storm. The driver led me through streets I had only seen in glossy magazines, past sparkling fountains and luxury boutiques, until we reached a private villa tucked behind manicured gardens. The gates opened silently, as if the world itself paused for what was about to happen. I stepped out, my heels clicking on the marble driveway. The ocean stretched beyond the horizon, but I barely noticed it. My attention was on the grand double doors that slowly swung open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of jasmine and old money. Every detail screamed wealth. Chandeliers, silk curtains, priceless paintings. But none of that mattered. My heartbeat raced. The envelope in my hand, now warm from my grasp, felt like a key to a puzzle I hadn't even begun to understand. And then he appeared. A man, tall, regal, with eyes that seemed to read every secret I had ever tried to hide. The prince. Not a title my family had ever whispered about. An entire world I hadn't known existed. "You must be Rose Armstrong," he said, his accent smooth, almost hypnotic. "I've heard about your grandfather's will, and your family's enthusiasm for it." I stiffened, unsure if he was praising me or mocking me. "I also know you were left with nothing but a ticket, and yet here you are." His gaze sharpened. "Not defeated. Not angry. Curious. That is why I called you." My lips parted, but no words came. Curiosity and wariness wove into one. "Why me?" He gestured toward a table. On it sat a folder marked with my grandfather's initials. Inside were documents, but not the usual inheritance papers. This was different. Plans. Investments. Correspondences. Secrets my grandfather had kept from everyone, including my mother. "You see," the prince continued, pacing slowly, "your grandfather left more than wealth. He left instructions. Strategic moves. alliances. And he trusted someone in his family to carry them forward, someone who would never be blinded by greed. I glanced down at the folder, feeling a thrill I hadn't felt in years. My mother's smug face flashed in my mind. The yacht, the penthouse, the millions, all theirs. Yet here was a chance I never expected. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Not what I want, he corrected, eyes glinting. What your grandfather wanted. He knew your family would celebrate themselves, take what they could, and leave the rest. But he left the rest for you. The words sank in slowly. My grandfather hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't favored my mother or sister over me. He had been playing a long game, one that required patience, intelligence, and courage. I swallowed, heart hammering. My family thought they had won. They had laughed at me, mocked me, left me alone with a plane ticket and nothing else. But now, I was the one holding the map. A plan, a purpose, a secret power no one suspected I had. And I smiled again, not at the prince, not yet. At the thought of my family, waiting back home, thinking they had the upper hand. Because soon, very soon, they would see that the quiet one, the underestimated one, had been the one with the key all along. The villa was silent once the prince left me with the documents. Alone, I spread the papers across the marble table, tracing each line, each signature, each hidden clause my grandfather had left for me. The reality hit slowly, like the tide creeping over bare sand. I had been underestimated all my life. And now, I held the power to turn that around. For years, my family had treated me as invisible. My mother laughed when they handed me a plane ticket instead of yachts and penthouses. My sister, Rebecca, smirked, convinced she was the favorite, the one destined to inherit the family empire. And Grandpa? He had been planning all along, quietly ensuring that the right person, me, would be the one to claim what truly mattered. I ran my fingers over a particular folder labeled Legacy Instructions. Inside there were letters to banks, companies, and advisors detailing transfers and contingencies. Every investment my grandfather had built, every partnership he had nurtured, they all had a contingency for me. It was like finding a secret map in a labyrinth I didn't even know existed. I leaned back, letting the magnitude of it sink in. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with clarity. For the first time, I understood. My anger, my humiliation, and my exclusion had been fuel for something greater. I wasn't just a hurt granddaughter. I was the one who had the chance to reclaim not just what was mine, but what had been stolen by arrogance, entitlement, and greed. A soft knock on the door startled me. The prince entered, carrying a single envelope. "This is from your grandfather," he said, placing it on the table. "Read it carefully. He knew your family would underestimate you. That's why he left instructions specifically for you, including contingencies they would never suspect." I tore open the envelope. Inside, a handwritten note in my grandfather's steady hand. "Rose, they will take what they want. They will celebrate and think they are clever. But you, my granddaughter, will inherit the future. Observe, learn, and act. Do not be blinded by anger. Be guided by patience. Everything they think they own is only temporary. Trust your instincts." I smiled. Not a small smile. Not the timid, polite one I had worn all my life. A cold, sharp, determined smile. I spent the rest of the evening planning. Not recklessly. Not for petty revenge. Every move would be precise, controlled. My mother and sister had laughed at me. They thought a plane ticket was my defeat. They had no idea that I was the one holding the key to the real inheritance. The legacy, the empire, and the truth. For the first time, I felt alive. Not with anger, not with pain, but with purpose. Every slight, every mocking word, every exclusion I had endured became fuel for my strategy. I would go home. I would smile at them. I would play the part of the oblivious daughter returning from Monaco. And then, silently, I would unravel the illusion they had built around themselves. The quiet one, the underestimated one, was awake. And soon, they would wish they had never underestimated her. The flight from Monaco felt like stepping into another life. Every mile over the clouds, I rehearsed my smile, my tone, the casual way I would appear defeated, but not really. My family thought I was returning empty-handed. They had no idea the storm I carried beneath my calm exterior. The airport was crowded, but I barely noticed anyone. My mind raced over the documents, the instructions, and the contingencies my grandfather had meticulously prepared. Each one was a piece of a puzzle I intended to solve methodically, leaving no room for error. The driver who greeted me outside the terminal didn't know who I was, nor did he need to. I slipped into the car, watching the familiar streets of my hometown scroll past. Each corner, each building a reminder of years of dismissal, of being invisible while Rebecca and my mother basked in praise and inheritance. By the time we arrived at the family estate, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her face tight, her smile forced. "Rose, you made it," she said, voice dripping with false warmth. I returned her smile. Small, polite, unassuming, everything they expected. Inside, the estate smelled of stale perfume and faint cigar smoke. Rebecca lounged on the velvet couch, scrolling through her phone, clearly uninterested in my presence. My entrance was met with polite nods and silent calculations. Perfect. Dinner was a tense affair. I let them chatter, watched every movement, every subtle glance. The envelope from the prince rested discreetly in my bag, my secret weapon unseen. "Did Monaco treat you well?" my mother asked, swirling her wine. "Lovely," I replied, eyes steady calm. But inside I was analyzing, planning. After dinner, I excused myself to rest, retreating to the study. The documents lay open before me. Legal contingencies, undisclosed bank accounts, and business contracts my family assumed were beyond my reach. I began drafting letters, sending discreet messages to lawyers, accountants, and advisors. Each step was measured, careful, invisible, but deadly effective. The first cracks appeared the next morning. A call from an investment firm to Rebecca, mentioning unusual account activity. A sudden inquiry from one of my mother's business partners. Small things easily dismissed by them as coincidence, but each one carefully orchestrated. I returned to the breakfast table with the same polite smile, sipping coffee as my family scrambled to respond to the subtle disruptions I had engineered overnight. Their panic was deliciously quiet. My mother's eyes darted toward me repeatedly, Rebecca's smirk faltering ever so slightly. They had no idea who was truly in control. By the end of the week, whispers spread through the family estate. Contracts delayed. Advisors seeking clarification. Investments questioned. And through it all, I remained serene, charming, unshakable. They thought I was still the girl who had been handed a plane ticket to Monaco, a minor inconvenience. They were wrong. The quiet one was no longer quiet. And the first moves of a game they didn't even know existed had begun. It started with a subtle hint, a ledger misplaced, a whispered comment from a family accountant. My instincts, honed from years of being dismissed, screamed at me. There was more beneath the surface than just exclusion. I spent the day combing through the documents, tracing every transaction, every transfer, every favor my mother and sister had engineered. And what I found made my pulse quicken. They had siphoned funds, hidden assets, and manipulated my grandfather's legacy. Every dinner, every polite smile, every family decision, had been a stage for theft and deception. Rebecca had set up shell companies, funneling luxury purchases into accounts no one else would suspect. My mother had quietly redirected payments I sent to cover bills that, in reality, they could have easily paid themselves. They weren't just careless or greedy. They had meticulously designed a system to keep me invisible while living off my labor and loyalty. I leaned back, letting the anger simmer beneath the surface. Years of frustration, humiliation, and exclusion converged in a single, crystalline thought. They underestimated me. They believed their arrogance could blind me. And now, I had all the evidence I needed. The first call I made was to the nurse who had cared for my grandfather in his final months. I requested discreet verification of the will, the accounts, and the transactions. Each confirmation I received built a clearer picture of just how deep the betrayal went. By late afternoon, I had everything organized. Spreadsheets, scanned documents, legal correspondence, and a timeline of their deception. I even uncovered proof of forged signatures. An audacious attempt to make it seem as if I had consented to their manipulation. And then came the moment that shifted everything. A single email from a trusted lawyer. Rose, everything you suspected is true. They have committed fraud. You have the right, and the means, to reclaim everything. But you must act carefully. One wrong move, and they could bury the truth again. I smiled, a cold, calculating smile. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. This was about justice. Every slight, every moment of being overlooked, every stolen opportunity, I would reclaim them all. I began planning the public revelation, the exposure that would leave no room for doubt. It wouldn't be a confrontation at the dinner table. It would be precise, deliberate, and undeniable. My mother would realize too late that her laughter at my plane ticket to Monaco wasn't the end of the story. It was the prologue. Rebecca would discover that her schemes, her manipulation, and her smug confidence were irrelevant against someone who had quietly learned every move they had made. I closed the documents, my mind racing with strategy. Every detail mattered. Timing, witnesses, proof, optics. I had been underestimated all my life. Now, I would turn that underestimation into my most powerful weapon. The quiet girl who had boarded a plane with nothing but curiosity and hurt was no longer quiet. She was awake. She was aware. And she was unstoppable. The family I once knew, the one that had celebrated their cunning while dismissing me, was about to face the reckoning they never saw coming. The world wasn't designed to favor someone like me, quiet, underestimated, overlooked, but it was full of allies waiting to be noticed. I just had to find them. The first was Elise, my grandfather's personal assistant, a woman who had quietly observed my family's schemes for years. She knew the truth but had stayed silent out of fear. When I reached out, her eyes widened in disbelief. "You're actually going to do it," she whispered. "You have every right. I've been waiting for someone like you." Next was Matteo, a corporate lawyer I had met years ago at a design expo. He had always respected my intelligence and precision. When I explained the situation, fraud, forgery, hidden assets, he didn't flinch. He said simply, "Let's make sure justice is irreversible." Together, we became a silent operation, moving with caution but precision. Every document I had unearthed, every email, every ledger entry, was analyzed, verified, and cross-referenced. Matteo helped draft notices, letters, and legal filings, all timed to coincide with key moments, ensuring the maximum effect. Elise provided insider knowledge, schedules, habits, even vulnerabilities in my mother and sister's routines. I returned to the family estate, appearing as the same naive girl who had boarded a plane with only a ticket in hand. My mother and Rebecca did not suspect a thing. They laughed, they teased, they dismissed me again. Perfect. The first move was subtle. A quietly sent email to a banking institution flagged irregular transfers linked to my mother and sister. Overnight, the bank froze certain accounts pending investigation. By morning, panic had subtly crept into the household. My mother whispered anxiously to Rebecca. I sipped my coffee, calm, almost bored, while the storm brewed around them. Next, Elise supplied a list of contracts that had been improperly executed under my grandfather's name. I instructed Matteo to send formal legal notices to ensure those contracts were immediately questioned, and any revenue or assets redirected would be legally frozen. Then came the psychological play. I appeared at the estate's breakfast table, engaging casually in conversation, letting my calmness and poise unsettle them. My mother's hand trembled as she poured juice. Rebecca's smirk was strained, her laughter forced. The plan was working. The first cracks had formed. Their arrogance, believing I was powerless, was unraveling before their eyes. By the end of the week, whispers spread beyond the household. Advisors, family friends, and business partners began asking questions. Their confidence faltered. My quiet presence, once dismissed, had become a looming threat. And through it all, I stayed calm. Observing, calculating, patient. Each step brought me closer to the reckoning they never imagined. They had underestimated me. They believed a plane ticket and polite smiles would keep me in my place. They were wrong. The quiet girl was no longer quiet. She had allies. She had proof. And most importantly, she had a plan. The first phase of their undoing was complete. And the best was yet to come. Just as the pieces were falling into place, The unexpected hit me. Betrayal, I realized, doesn't always come from the obvious enemy. Sometimes it creeps in disguised as loyalty. Elise, my steadfast ally, hesitated one morning. "Rose, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice tight, eyes darting. My heart skipped. Something in her tone, fear, maybe guilt, warned me. "They know," she whispered. "Mom. Rebecca, they've hired a private investigator. They're tracing everything. If they find out we've been gathering proof, they'll destroy it all. And they might come for you." My pulse raced, but I didn't panic. Instead, a cold clarity set in. Years of being underestimated had trained me to survive moments like this. That night, I sat alone in my hotel suite, reviewing every document, every email, every ledger. The risk was real. If a single paper fell into the wrong hands, my entire plan, my justice, could collapse. And yet I felt something else too, strength. Every obstacle, every threat only sharpened my resolve. The next morning, I confronted Elise calmly. "You're scared. That's human. But hesitation now could cost everything." She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and nodded. Together, we reinforced security measures, encrypted files, and duplicated evidence. There was no room for error. Meanwhile, my mother and sister escalated their own moves. Rebecca tried to bribe a key witness, someone who had seen her funneling money. And my mother attempted to forge another layer of documents to make it appear I had consented to their theft. The audacity was staggering. But I had anticipated this. Every move they made, every desperate scramble, was meticulously countered. Then came the psychological blow. I walked into their penthouse one evening, smiling casually, holding nothing but a cup of coffee. "Good evening," I said. Their eyes widened. Not at my presence, but at the knowledge they couldn't hide anything from me anymore. Rebecca tried to bluster. "Rose, you don't know what you're doing." I cut her off, voice steady, deliberate. "I know exactly what I'm doing. And you've spent years teaching me how." The room went silent. They realized, finally, that I had seen everything, documented everything, anticipated everything. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The darkest hour wasn't fear. It wasn't panic. It was watching them scramble, realizing that no manipulation, no charm, no money, could undo the truth I now held. And in that darkness, I understood one crucial thing. Sometimes, the most dangerous battles aren't with your enemies. They're with those you once trusted. By the time the night ended, my plan had survived its greatest test. The betrayal within had surfaced, tested my resolve, and confirmed my unshakable focus. Tomorrow, the reckoning would come. The family that thought they could erase me would finally see the quiet girl transform into the unstoppable force she was always meant to be. The day arrived with a sharp, electric tension. I could feel it in the air, the quiet before the storm. The estate had been cleared for what looked like a routine family meeting, but today, everything would change. I walked in dressed simply, calm and confident. My mother and Rebecca were already there, faces painted with fake smiles, trying to mask the unease they didn't want me to see. Grandpa was present too, seated at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. I knew he had already reviewed the files, the evidence, every single proof of their betrayal. I began slowly, deliberately. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice steady. "I hope you've been well." My mother stiffened. "Rose, what is this about?" she asked, her tone too sharp. I smiled faintly, producing a folder from my bag. "About everything you've tried to hide from me." Rebecca's hand trembled. "Rose, don't." I held up a finger. "Silence. Let me finish." I opened the folder, letting the documents spill across the polished table. Ledgers, bank statements, forged contracts, receipts, even recordings of private conversations. Every act of deceit, every moment of manipulation, every dollar misappropriated, it was all there. My mother's face drained of color. Rebecca tried to grab a paper, but Grandpa's hand blocked her, firm and resolute. "You taught me one thing," I said, looking at them both. "That loyalty means nothing if it's one-sided. That being responsible while you took advantage meant nothing. That helping you while being excluded meant nothing. Today that changes." I laid out the proof methodically, explaining how I had discovered each scheme, every forgery, and every stolen moment. The room went silent, each revelation landing like a hammer blow. Then came the legal strike. Matteo, my lawyer, stepped forward and confirmed the filings, the freezes, the pending investigations. Your assets, your money, your privileges, everything illicitly gained, is under review. The law now sees what you hoped to hide. My mother stumbled backward. Rebecca's smirk was gone. Panic replaced it entirely. I leaned back, calm, unshaken. You thought a plane ticket and polite dismissals would make me powerless. You were wrong. I may have been underestimated, but I was never weak. Grandpa finally spoke, his voice resonant and proud. This family tried to erase her, but she refused. She upheld loyalty where none was reciprocated. Today justice is served, not for vengeance but for truth. I watched my mother slump into her chair, defeated. Rebecca's eyes darted, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The reckoning wasn't just legal. It was moral, psychological, and absolute. They had gambled with deceit, and they lost. And in that moment, I realized the most powerful revenge isn't cruelty. It's reclaiming your worth, exposing the truth, and standing unshakable while those who wronged you tremble. I closed the folder. The room was silent. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply stood, ready to walk away, free, unbound, and vindicated. The family that had tried to erase me now had no choice but to see me. The quiet girl? She had become the storm. The day after the reckoning felt almost surreal. The house, once a battlefield of whispered schemes and hidden betrayals, now seemed hollow, emptied of the tension that had clung to every corner. I walked through it slowly, letting my eyes linger on the remnants of a life that had tried to define me, and failed. Mom and Rebecca were no longer the unshakable figures I had grown up under. The authorities had intervened, and the investigations were underway. Their power, built on lies and manipulation, had crumbled. Yet I felt no triumph in their downfall. My victory wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about reclaiming myself. I went to my grandfather's study, where the scent of old books and polished wood welcomed me. He sat in his chair, cane resting across his knees, his eyes warm but proud. You did what needed to be done, he said quietly. Not out of anger, but with integrity. I nodded, feeling the weight of years of exclusion lift off my shoulders. It's finally over, I murmured. Grandpa smiled. It's never truly over. But you've turned it into a beginning. I realized he was right. The plane ticket I had once thought was a mockery, the one handed to me while the rest of my family inherited yachts, luxury cars, and estates, wasn't a punishment. It was an opportunity, a chance to start anew, away from manipulation, betrayal, and entitlement. I left the estate, suitcase in hand, stepping into the crisp morning air with a sense of calm I hadn't known in decades. Every breath was mine to claim, every decision mine to make. The world didn't define me. The family that had tried to erase me didn't hold my worth. I did. Settling into Monaco wasn't glamorous. It wasn't about yachts or penthouses. It was about autonomy, creativity, and freedom. I poured myself into my design firm, channeling the rage, the heartbreak, and the lessons into something constructive, something lasting. The betrayal that had cut so deeply became fuel for ambition, vision, and self-respect. Messages and calls from estranged family members continued, but I answered none. Silence became my shield, clarity my compass. I realized that the ultimate revenge isn't public humiliation. It's living well, thriving independently, and never allowing anyone to diminish your value again. As the sun dipped over the horizon, reflecting gold over the Mediterranean waters, I felt it fully. A quiet, unwavering peace. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and excluded. I had been the quiet girl in the corner, the one ignored, the one overlooked. But now, I was unstoppable. And in that freedom, I found the greatest revenge of all, myself. Thanks for watching till end. Was revenge worth it? Comment below if you enjoyed it. Also do well to subscribe and become part of this amazing family.